Hey there! Today I would like to give you a short overview of what to do when your pen skips a beat. This is more or less in response to the same question I have received from a couple of people in the span of a few days, so I thought it would be interesting to try and address this issue. So this is mostly a concern for people who are somewhat new to fountain pens, who buy them and they find out that when they ink up the pen, they start to write, the pen often skips a bit. Now there's a few things you have to realize. Some people are worried that the feeds or even the nibs of their pens may be broken. Well, don't worry too much. This is a normal fountain pen thing. So if you're writing with a pen and you stop to write for a while, maybe you're talking to someone or whatever, and then you write again, often if you didn't cap the pen, your pen may be a bit dry. It's part of the fountain pen experience. This is what happens. Now I'll show you a couple of tips, things you can do to get the ink flowing again. One thing I did not show you is to use the converter to push ink back into the feed. So you can, this is a push converter, so I just slide this thing to push ink. You see that? There's the ink. I'll pull it back in again before. Yeah, okay. You can also do that with a screw type converter, but as you can see, that's a bit dangerous. You saw what just happened there. And that could have been on my shirt, could have been on my paper, so be a little careful about that. I'll show you some other things that I think are relatively safe. I'll show you one technique that's definitely not safe, as I show you. Yes, you may end up like this, but there are some things you can do that will not get you into contact with ink whatsoever. Okay. I'll also show you a bit about the inside of a fountain pen, so that you get a bit of a feel of what's happening. That I'm not absolutely sure what causes this problem. If it's maybe the channel on the feed drying out a bit, or whatever. So if anyone has any ideas, please comment. I'm interested in the physics of the problem, so to speak. Okay, so we'll move on to some thoughts and suggestions. The final thing I should say is, if you really want to avoid these startup issues, perhaps try another ink. Some inks are a bit drier than others. I always think that Parker Quink is okay. It's an interesting color blue, this one I have, but it is a bit dry, at least the one I have. Some inks are wetter than others, so maybe you want to experiment a little bit with that. Also keep in mind that some nibs are simply drier than others and may dry out a bit faster than others. It's part of life. If you want to avoid that, the solution is to use this, because this will make sure your pen doesn't skip. Of course, it will also mean you'll go to hell. So I suggest you simply stick to your fountain pen, bear with it. It's not such a huge problem, and I'll show you some things on how to try and solve it. Now, before we do that, I got another question from some people, and the question is, what's in here? What's in the cage? The cage houses my hamster Lord Murdelin, and Lord Murdelin is not a hamster that really enjoys being petted. So I'm not going to put it on my hand or anything, but because so many people were interested, I'll show you what he looks like right now. So here we go, Lord Murdelin eating a raisin. There we go. And after that, I'll show you some tips on how to avoid dryness in your pen. Hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye. Okay, if we want to understand why our pen sometimes dries out, we have to understand the parts of the pen. Cap, clip, barrel. Grip section, nib, feed. This is where the cartridge or the converter goes in, right? And by the way, yes, I am a fountain pen lover, you can judge it by my fingers. Cartridge or converter goes in there, grip section, nib, feed. Pull it out. Don't try that with any pen. With some pens it's very difficult. Some pens have a screw-in sort of feed and nib unit. Please be careful. Please don't ruin your pen. I'm just doing this to show you something. Okay, so this would go in there, right? Cartridge or converter goes on top of that. So this is a nipple that will disappear, either partially or completely, into the cartridge or converter. Okay, the nib. What do we see? We see the breather hole and we see this sort of slit, right? You can see that if you put it on your thumbnail, it'll open up a bit. This is not a very flexible nib, so it doesn't really open up. In any case, that's the slit. Alright, then we have the feed. The feed has these nice little gills, and down the middle you can sort of see that, this white thing, that is the channel. I'm not sure how well my camera can focus at this short, well, okay, it seems to work. Okay, so we have this channel, and at the end here, you see these grooves, okay? Well, the ink goes through that groove, into the channel, down to the nib. Capillaries in the paper will suck the ink from the cartridge, through the feed, into the nib, well, into the nib, you know, it's not really into the nib, right? And then it goes onto the paper. That is how a fountain pen writes. Now, the problem with that is that sometimes your pen simply dries out a bit. It can happen. If you are writing and then you talk to someone and you continue to write, your pen may be a little dry. Does that mean your pen is ruined or that the feed is broken? No, not at all. It's a normal thing. So really, don't worry. Here's a Parker Urban. I've just inked it up. It writes straight away. I was hoping it wouldn't because I left it with the cap off. But in any case, it can happen at some point that the pen suddenly stops writing. I'll just dry it off a bit. Now maybe it starts a problem. Of course, I'm not having that right now, and it's not a really big issue. What would happen is that I would do this, and instead of ink, I would just get a nice little scratch in the paper, or something like that. And now I'm inducing that because I rotate the nib a bit, but that's what would happen. So first of all, make sure you have the nib well aligned with the paper. This is how it's supposed to write. Not like this, not like that, a little bit like that, but it's actually not meant to be used like that. So if you write and you keep having problems like these, I'm sure you understand that you have to align the nib well, but what can you do? What can you actually do to get your pen to write again? Well, there are a few things you can do. First of all, what you might try is to gently tap the nib on the paper. So don't ram the nib into the paper, just gently tap it. Often that'll get an ink flow going again. If you're not sure about that, you think, well, I don't want to damage my nib. As I said, you have to do this gently, but if you don't want to do that, what you can do is just tap the back end of the barrel. I can't really show you that because you can't see my finger because of the way my camera is angled, but that's fine. I'm just tapping it like this with my finger while holding the nib down. Don't do that too hard, because if you do, you may end up hitting the paper or ink. Of course, that's not happening right now. No, sorry, I can't show you that. In any case, what may happen is that ink may fly out onto the page. So you don't want to do that too forcefully, just a gentle tap. And often that will get some drops of ink into the channel and then onto the paper. You can also make a quick motion like that. Bang, bang. And then, again, you will get some ink flowing into the channel. But be prepared, if you do that too roughly, and with some pens, ink will just fly out onto the paper. So this is only a last resort. If I really have to get my ink flowing straight away, bang. And there you go. Here's an ink drop, which is what we've got a blotter for. There we go. Okay. Another trick you may use. Unscrew your pen, take out the cartridge or the converter. This is a push type converter. You see I can push out a bit of ink. You can do the same with one of those converters that you have to twist. Works the same way. Or you can just do this with a cartridge by gently squeezing it. If you squeeze a cartridge too hard, it may break. So be a little careful. What I do here is I just push out some ink, then push the nib in there. What will happen is that the ink drop disappears. Did you see that? It's gone. What will happen, it's a little difficult to show you this with this small nib, but ink will get into the channel. It will get in there between the nib and the feed. Now if I put this back in place, There go the ink drops. I was a bit enthusiastic here. Your pen will write again. So I wouldn't do that with 3 drops, just do that with 1 drop, okay? I was just trying to make a point here. So what I would do... I'm really making a mess here. Okay, so what I would do is just make sure... Okay, so my feed and my nib are dry. I gently push out a bit of ink, and I pull the rest back in there again. I found that to work pretty well, but that's a bit of a lengthy operation. So if you're in a hurry, I would say tap the pen or tap the nib gently on the paper a few times, and if you're in a real hurry, bang. Make the bang movement, and then you'll get some ink on your paper, but you will be able to write. If that's an absolute emergency, then that may be useful. Okay, well, this was a bit of an odd video. I hope this was useful, because I showed some weird stuff. I hope it was useful. If you have any other tips on how to get your ink flowing again, write a comment, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.